What's up, family? Welcome back to another episode of Shepherd and Souls. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. I'm going to keep saying that at the beginning of every episode because without you guys watching, we wouldn't have anybody to share these things that God has given us too. So we do appreciate y'all. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. I've been seeing a lot of people just from my childhood and people that I've known from past, and people, it's just affecting people.
I really thought people like you better than me because...
Why?
You got a lot of support.
I got a lot of support.
Yeah. But you know what? This ain't about
I've been
people supporting me.
I've been hitting people over the head with stuff since I was a little more brash probably than you were as a young Christian out in the streets, and people remember that. And
I don't know.
I think true. I don't know. I was different originally.
I think I was too.
Yeah, so I don't know.
But maybe definitely in different ways.
Yeah,
for sure.
But today we're talking about how to disagree well, aka arguments. We don't like to call them that. We don't want to jump into that, but we want to say how to disagree well in relationships and especially marriage. We've had quite a bit of experience in disagreeing. I would say I
feel like
it's gotten less frequent.
I think you can disagree and not argue.
Absolutely.
I think you can. I don't think a disagreement has to lead to an argument. And I think disagreements are very much a part of any relationship.
Yeah, I think it would be impossible to have a relationship.
To know someone and not disagree.
Yeah, but it can be done tastefully in a way that honors the other person, in a way that honors the Lord.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
But rarely do we start out knowing how to do that well. I think even as believers, we all clearly, it shows, social media shows us that believers are up there with arguing.
Some of the feistiest,
yes. That we do not know how to disagree with our neighbor and still love them well.
Without it being like...
Without offending them and insulting them and making it personal, for sure. So we're going to talk about that today.
Indeed. So we kind of both answered this question.
Okay.
But did you like to argue, I guess, prior to me, like us being married? And do you like to argue still?
No and no.
No and no?
No, I don't think. I think that I would avoid conflict for the most part. I would not say that I'm super confrontational, and I don't like where arguing leaves me feeling. But I can say in the midst of an argument, like if you've brought me there, I can't say if someone has brought me there. If I have allowed myself to engage to a certain level, then I'm there. Let's do this. So I'm trying to learn the discipline.
That's fair. I can say that.
About me?
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
That I'm not really trying to argue, but if we...
Basically, they take you to the park, you're going to swing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. You're going to be on them swings. No?
Yeah. What about you?
I like to argue. I liked to argue.
And you're not
I think that is
confrontation.
I think that is very that was a common thing amongst my family, and especially my family. They could tell you that was like, you're gonna be a lawyer when you go, because you just love to argue with somebody. And I think it comes from, I didn't say I like to argue more so than my pride of feeling like I know what I'm talking about and you don't.
Wanting to be right.
Yeah, and the bad part, and this sounds even worse to say, but the bad part is a lot of times I was, and that doesn't help.
I think that's where a lot of people fail to argue well, is when they are in the position of maybe being right and having someone else to have to agree with them. Yeah,
and that's kind of what I argue about any and everything. The barbershop, locker room, I was like, you can't, I did not like to lose an argument. I'm very quick-witted, which can be bad. Usually when I'm at that point, nothing good comes out of my mouth that is honoring to God, unless I am in a evangelistic type of conversation. Which in those, my quick-wittedness, God has used that to allow me to keep people on track and to continue to answer rebuttals. But other than that, I did like to do that. Now being married and for going on 6 years, it's exhausting. there's no benefit. There's no like, I don't get anything out of it. Nothing happens because I guess in the past when I argued, I didn't have to go home and live with that person in that space. Like you just like argue with that person, you say what you said, and either if y'all didn't talk for a couple of days at school or in passing with your teammate, like who cares? And then they'll get over it when they get over it, whatever the case may be. But that's not how that works at home. So it's really pointless. Now I just don't see a need to fully just go back and forth over things that are trivial at times.
I think that like I said, in a marriage and friendship, anywhere where you are in a relationship with in community with other believers and unbelievers as well, like depending on where you are, what circles you find yourself in, I think that we can hold space for disagreeing. I think that is a part of life, and it's sometimes necessary because I think people are allowed to have their own thoughts. Obviously, we hope that those thoughts are rooted in scripture, but there are a lot of things about life that are nuanced, and we all are not always going to see things the same way. There's so much about us that are very individual, and then there are some things about all of us that every human has alike. So that is going to create an environment where disagreements come, and I think anticipating that could possibly happen, but then also having a conviction of it's okay for me to not agree with everyone in every space that I'm in, but have a conviction to respect and love and honor that person in your disagreeing. And that's not something that like I do perfectly at all, but I know that that's how it should be for sure.
Yeah, I think be able to say it. Like I think we've said I don't agree, but like, and that's usually the end of like we can have a conversation respectfully and just be like I don't agree with that. And if it's something we got to make a decision, we'll probably reconvene later, talk about it. But you got to be able to say that like it's okay not to agree. It's just all about how you do it, and I think that is the part that we get wrong is how we get to the disagreement or the things we say or the initial shock of somebody disagreeing with us, and then like that initial feeling you get, whether it be a knot in your stomach, a pit in your throat, however you describe it, that is a big ball of sin up in there. That's what you start feeling.
I think that's our
pride.
That
big ball of sin up in there. Like, how dare this person say to me that they don't like this or they don't agree with me or what I did was wrong, and then you immediately get into defense mode and want to fight. Not fight, when I say not physically, but like you want to go back and forth. You want to defend yourself, which we've kind of been, if you weren't raised in a Christian home, you've probably been taught that. You've been taught to defend yourself. You've been taught to don't let nobody do this or talk to you this kind of way or this and this or that and that and that. So you bring those kind of things into relationships and into marriage, and you start having your dukes up against the person that you're you're supposed to be one with, and it starts to cause little by little. Each one starts to cause division and can tear down somebody emotionally and physically. It can do a lot. Like our words and these disagreements can have a lot of effects that in the time, in the moment, we can't even foresee. So
I think that there's also another thing that we have to be sure of, and that is that, the Bible's clear and it tells us that we don't war against flesh and blood. Like our enemies are not made in the image of God. The people who are our true enemies are not flesh and blood. They're Satan. He is our one and only enemy, and everything else wicked derives from him, comes from him. And so when we can keep that in mind when we are faced with a disagreement, that this person is not my enemy. Like they're not my enemy, and so I can share how I'm feeling or what I think about something without attacking them or insulting them or demeaning them, because I think our tone also can come across as I'm more right than you, and I don't value what you have to say. So I think going into any situation where, it might be walking on eggshells, or you already know that I don't agree with this person on much, but I know that they're made in the image of God, and I know that they are not my enemy, I think can already set the tone with how you approach a disagreement for sure. Yeah,
and right now, I feel like God has given me, he gives me these like not weird, but like these passions for certain topics and certain things, like randomly in certain times. And right now it happened to be right around the time we were recording this, but just the role of a husband and what that looks like when it comes to conflict management and conflict resolution and disagreements, and what the Bible has to say about our role as husbands, that we are supposed to, the ultimate call to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And I don't think we really think about the full scale and scope of what that means. I think it's easier to look at it. I think when I first got married, it was more so just like, I'm gonna serve my wife, serve, right? But then you start to really, as I get older, and start to think about the totality of that statement. Like, what does that truly mean, that I'm to love you like Christ loved the church? If you don't know what he did for the church, he gave his life. He gave the ultimate sacrifice of his life so that we could have a relationship with him. He laid down his life, literally. And if that is what I'm supposed to do, it doesn't just encompass one area. It encompasses all that I am as a husband. So does that mean that I'm always going to be comfortable? Absolutely not. It means the opposite. I'm most likely going to be uncomfortable a lot, because I'm constantly having to sacrifice and give and let things die off that I have perceptions of and things. You have to keep chiseling those things away. And that's a couple of scriptures that kind of put my mind on it. But Philippians 2:3-8, where I'll just read it. It says, "Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges, took the humble position of a slave, and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross." All right, so that is the framework. I think when I first thinking of others, just alone, the thinking of others is better than yourselves. If we can start there in a disagreement, if we can start there in a disagreement, okay, let me take a seat back. Let me take what you have to say is the most important right now, because I'm thinking of you as better than me. I'm not being selfish. I'm not looking out for my own interests. I'm looking out for others' interests. So it starts there. I think a lot of these things, if we're gonna say, you can be like, "Shep, that seems a little like Little House on the Prairie. Like, that ain't reality." But this is what we're called to do. This is what the Bible says. This is the direction which we got to strive to be. And it starts with that. Like, even the worst person, it says, it doesn't say think of others you like as better than yourselves. It says think of others as better than yourselves. And think about, again, it says that we must. It doesn't say you should, you can, you must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. And he said, "I am the ultimate authority. I have made the earth, and everything was made through me, but yet I'm going to step down and to be in my creation and be subject to my creation, knowing I made them." You don't even do that with your kids. Like, we'd be like, "I made what the old parents used to say. I took you in this world. I brought you in this world. I take you out." Yeah. So but imagine God being the one who made you, and then he's watching people who made him talk to him crazy. Like, you know how much that has to take an ultimate sacrifice and ultimate love to do that. And it was a lot of humility. It was, right? And that's just the first part, but then it continued. Like, that is the mindset we should have, and taking on Jesus Christ. So as a husband, we got to study all of these things, husbands. We can't just, we have to study who Jesus was, his mindset, his example, the things he did, the things he said, how we got to study him. If we to be like him, we got to study him. We got to know how that plays out and how that affects our everyday life. And I don't know how I don't think you can really measure it, but I know your wife will be better off if you continue to strive to try to be like Jesus in these kind of conversations. Have you seen, from me, I guess, and this is all we hear, y'all hear, this is real life. So if she say no, then she say no. But I guess, what growth have you seen in me? Like, when we first started, obviously dating, until now, with me being around more mature believers and different men and different people that have kind of been around since we've been married. Like, have you seen any growth? Have you seen any things that still trigger me? Like, just kind of that kind of.
Yeah, I think that when we first got married, you were very easily offended. And I think that the hard thing with that is if you dated, as believers should date, I would say, is you didn't live together, so there's still so much that you are learning about that person. So when you are newly married, there's so much to discover. And so you're trying to learn that person, but to also live with them and make strides in life. And so I think that there was stuff that I was still learning about you, and I would do things that bothered you, or there was just things about me that you probably didn't understand, and so that would bother you. And I think that you would express them very honestly, which I find value in that. But sometimes it would be very brash and very there was oh, that's offensive. You actually didn't have to say all of that. Like, you would say what offended you and I'm gonna make it sting. So I think that there were things like that. But then when you realized, I think through discipleship, that what you said to, the things that you said to me in moments where we were not on the best terms, we were disagreeing, had repercussions. Like, they would leave wounds. That you started to take more responsibility of caring for me in the moments that we disagree. And then I think you also have found value in, when we do disagree, what I say to you in those moments of how I'm feeling, you take those things to heart. If I tell you that this is how I'm feeling when you do this, you remember that. You remember, oh, this is when I'm doing this. I don't want to make you feel that way. So I think there's more of I'm caring for your heart. You take responsibility for that, and in the beginning, I don't think you realized that was your responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Talk about the effects of a husband who is harsh or brash or argumentative, or any of those, all of the above. Talk about the effects of that on a wife's just countenance, her heart, her desires for him physically, just kind of.
Yeah, I think recently I told you that I was when we had gotten into a disagreement, and there was you definitely are never as harsh to me as you were before, but I did let you know, and that's not a caveat, is that I think as I've grown in our disagreements, I've been able to express, this is how I'm feeling when you do this. I think that is important for both of us to know, when you say these things to me, this is how it makes me feel. And you could still forgive somebody and say, I just want you to know that when you do these things, this is how it affects me. But I think a wife whose husband is harsh with her, it's very discouraging. There's this discouragement that falls on a woman, I could probably say, when a husband is hard and lacks compassion and is very rigid. So it can be discouraging. You can feel very disconnected, and you don't feel loved. And I think what women need from their husbands most is to feel loved, no matter what, no matter the situation, to know, even when we're disagreeing, that he loves me, not because it's an assumed thing, but it's shown to me by the way he cares for me when we are disagreeing. And the discouragement piece is just that's the best way they can show up. Just I can't do anything right. I didn't mean to offend you, but I did. I'm trying to do this, but because you don't understand, it bothers you, or because you feel like you have a better way. But that discouragement and the disconnection, feeling like I'm not connected to this person 100%, I would say, maybe I shouldn't say 100%, but for most of us, that always correlates to the bedroom. Your sex life, or a wife who's being discouraged and disconnected from her husband, sexually is probably closed off too. And because women connect to their husbands emotionally and intimately, that goes beyond physical intimacy. When someone is being harsh and demeaning and lacking compassion, is not seeking understanding, and is not being soft towards them, it's hard for a woman to feel let her guard down and feel safe and feel feminine in those moments. I know and for me, I felt like I would have to defend myself, that I got to take care of me, I have to protect me. I got to look out for me. It makes you hard, and I don't think any husband wants a hard wife.
Yeah. So what would you say to the husband who is well, I'm just being honest, and I'm just saying what needs to be said, and whatever. What would you say to that husband who is kind of rejecting even what you're saying now, because it's like, well, she needs to stop being so soft, or she needs to stop being this way.
And I'm an advocate for honesty. I feel like we can't, in any disagreement or even an argument or a fight that you have in marriage, I think honesty is the way out. Honesty is a way to reconciliation. But I think we all know that the Bible tells us to tell the truth in love. And so I think that if you have, for wives and for husbands, we have to let go of the idea that our spouse is never going to have anything hard to say to us.
Sure.
That, I mean, if we're in this till death do us part, hard stuff is going to come up. We're going to do things to sin against one another. We are going to hurt one another, and we're going to do things that is not mindful of our spouse, and our spouse is going to have something hard to say to us. But if we can take on the idea that I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm going to love my spouse in telling the truth. I believe that if our hearts are right, husband and wife, that whoever is being the recipient of the truth being told, if it's being told to us in a way that shows that this is a safe place, then your wife's not going to walk away torn apart. But if your wife or your husband is extremely sensitive, and whatever you say to them, no matter what tone it is, they take it the wrong way, that is a separate issue. But I think that saying the truth in love matters, because we need honesty. We need to, I don't say sugarcoat it, don't say anything. Like, if it needs to be said, you can say it in love.
And I'm a big proponent of responsibility, like taking responsibility for the things that go wrong in our marriage, because I think God is the one he's the reconciler. He saw the issue in Genesis 3 and declared that the seed of a woman would crush the head of this. Like, he's the one who inserted Jesus. He's the one who put it back together, right? And if we are to love like that, I take the responsibility in those things. And a lot of times that conversation comes up about rights, right? Like, well, how is that fair? Because that was kind of my initial question. Like, a lot of times when I had older men around, and they would always chuckle, right? The world's verbiage is say happy wife, happy life, kind of like jokingly, whatever she say do, right? Kind of thing. But I don't think it's just as something as trivial as that. It's not as lighthearted as that, but it is a sense of a dying to self, right? And when I mean, like, for example, something as small as, like, I didn't grow up in a home where decorating was important. Like, we had everything for Christmas. Like, we didn't lack Christmas. Christmas, it was still happy time. We was excited. We still got gifts and all that stuff. Enjoyed one another, yeah. But we weren't big on, like, decorating crafts, things like that, or just things were different. Like, small stuff like that sometimes turn into huge arguments. Like, traditions that Heaven may have had that I didn't have. Like, when we first started married, I had such a brain of, like, I'm going to do things the way that I know how to do. But, like, now, being married for a little bit, it's like that. If this brings joy to my wife and joy to my kids, why does it matter if it's done one way or the other? Like, those are the questions that you got to ask yourself before you open your mouth, right? I think as a husband, we naturally see something and we want to say something. And it's not always beneficial to say something, right? It's not always beneficial in that moment. Here's another example of who Jesus is and how he did things in Isaiah 53, which is the chapter on the suffering servant, which is a foreshadow to Jesus Christ. But it says here, Isaiah 53, 7-9, it says, "He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep is silent before the shears, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, that his life was cut short in midstream, but he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong, and had never deceived anyone, but he was buried like a criminal, and he was put in a rich man's grave." Right? And again, I'm gonna keep telling you, we are to be like Jesus. You hear these words that they use: oppressed, treated harshly, yet never said a word, unjustly condemned. All these things. Again, obviously, I'm not saying your marriage should be like that, but you are not the husbands. You are not the most important part of this equation. It's not you. And I know that can be hard, because we are in this era of men are the prize kind of thing, and things like that. If Jesus came down and said he was the prize, we wouldn't have salvation, because he truly is. He's the one that we need. But he's like, amen to that. Like, he didn't do that. So you are in the equation. It is your God, your wife, your children, and then I'm at the bottom. Does that mean that I'm not cared for and loved by them? No. Does that mean that I don't have an opinion? I can't say what I... No. But at the end of the day, we are called to be the ones to hold them up, to be the ones to love them, the ones to cherish. Like, we have to do that nurturing part of it, especially for our wives' heart. Like I didn't understand the fullness of that. Like, I married heaven, I love heaven, but I didn't understand how to cherish and take care of her heart. Mm-hmm. I'm still learning how to do that, but that is the most important part of it. And if me having an argument, me saying, if we have a disagreement and I feel like I have legitimate grounds to stand on, mm-hmm. but yet she may not see it right away or whatever the case may be, it is not my job, therefore, to say, okay, I'm just going to sit in my anger for 5 days until she decides she want to come to her senses and say it's right. No, I'm going to tell you this every time. There's something you did wrong in the argument. Mm-hmm. Every time. There's something you did or could have done better. Let me say that. There's something you could have done better in the disagreement or the argument, husband. Mm-hmm. Start there. Be the reconciler. Jesus, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He didn't say, I waited until they decided they loved me first, and then I went and died for them. No, it says that while we were tripping, he went and got us. Mm-hmm. So if in those situations where there's an argument that takes place and you're like, man, I know I'm right this time. She ain't, nah, I ain't going. Because I've had those moments like, I ain't saying nothing, bro. Like, I know for a fact that this time, like, I wasn't out of pocket at all. But something that I said hurt her heart. Something that I said was out of the context or the wrong tone. I could have handled it better. I could have said it better. Start there, husband, with a reconciliation, boyfriend, whoever. Start there with that part. Go and reach out to you. Bring y'all back together, because at the end of the day, if we're one flesh, there is no winner and there's no loser. Yeah. If she wins and I lose, we lose. If I win and she... husband, you definitely lose.
if your wife is mad at
you. Yeah, you lose, bro. Like, it's what it is. Like, what's the point? So you just walk around and be like, I'm good. She going, no, that's not the attitude of Christ Jesus. And this takes humility. This is a hard conversation to have, because I've seen 90% of the world is going to tell you you're crazy and you're tripping. Like, that sounds like a miserable existence. No, it does not. Why? Yeah. Because I am getting an opportunity to experience who Jesus is to me every single time I love my wife the way I should. Yeah. When it's done the right way and I watch her light up and I watch her heart become free and I watch her break down barriers and things like that, I get a glimpse of who Jesus is to me. Mm-hmm. That matters. Nothing else. When I'm married to my wife, nothing else matters to me at this point. Like, if you are a shell of yourself and I'm walking around feeling good, then what's the point? Like, I don't...
not married. I think that I do want to add something to this and be mindful how I say it, because I can imagine, people who just, we were not here 6 years ago. We would not have been able to have this conversation, and I'm sure in 6 more years we can come back to this conversation and we would probably laugh at how much we thought we knew in this moment sitting here, as we have.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about where we were in six years ago when we were like, oh, we know how to do this marriage thing. But I think that for the wives, and we will move on to just regular relationships, but marriage speaking, and for wives, if you can acknowledge that, I do have a husband who is seeking the Lord to serve me well, to love me well. He doesn't do it perfectly, but I know that it's on his heart. I know that it's something he cares about. I can say that about you, that no, we don't love each other perfectly, but I know that it matters to you that you become a better husband and father continuously, that you are continuing to be made more like Christ, and in result you love us better. I know that about you. It can be easy. I want to vouch for the men who are saying like, well, what if they have a wife who does not care? That I want to encourage you by saying that to the man who's has a wife who's maybe walking in some sin right now that she's not aware, like that she's not wanting to acknowledge, that continuing to love like Christ is going, and prayer is going to do far more for your wife's heart than you constantly.
You're trying to be the Holy Spirit.
Trying to be the Holy Spirit, or you trying to make something right that you can't make right. And then second, for the wives, if you have a husband who is trying and he is seeking the Lord, you have to give him space to do that. And I think that honoring your husband, even in moments where he gets it wrong, is still what we are called to do. And that's not something that I'm perfect at. I know that was convicted of I see my husband like, this is really important to him. Is it equally important to me that I serve him and that I honor him? And I think by you leading in that has challenged me to be that way. And so I would encourage wives to take a look at your husband, and regardless of what he's gotten wrong, can you look at the things that he's gotten right and tell him that he's doing those things right? And then also looking for ways to love him better too. Because it can be discouraging. We had a moment like that where it can be discouraging when your husband is trying to do so much right and there's no feedback. There's no feedback of like, do you feel like we're making progress? Do you feel more cared for? It's important even if it's not a verbal dialogue is a plus, but even if there's an actions, a back and forth, I'm going to care for you better because I see that you are caring for me better. And if you have a husband who is harsh and he's not kind, that you continuing to love him well and consider him more important than yourself is going to push your marriage closer to Christ than you being combative as well. And again, I want to say that this is obviously a very nuanced situation. Every marriage is different. There are people who are married to men or women with very hard hearts. And I would say that don't completely take our advice, seek counseling and people who are a bit more. But if you have a marriage that, is growing and it's a healthy growth, I think it goes a long way to acknowledge your spouse's growth and seek ways to serve and to love them in ways that they receive it most.
Amen. Let's piggyback off what you're saying. And I think James 1:19-20 is something that's all encompassing. I mean, if you can memorize the scripture, this is one that you should have in your memory bank. It says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. Just remembering, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry. And I think if we can live by that in our marriage, in our relationships with our kids, at work, all the things, it will give us opportunity to take a deep breath and truly understand what somebody's trying to say, or process what they're trying to say. Not for us to make rash decisions and kind of combative type conversations. Just take a second to listen, because I'm not saying that there's not times where your wife will come at you crazy and say something that you were not expecting, and now all of a sudden you feel some kind of way. Like, that's going to happen, and vice versa. Or you may have an expectation. A lot of times arguments come from unmet expectations, right? But husband or wife or whoever, if you come home or you just at home and something doesn't go your way, and then the first thought is, well, I wanted it to, that is selfish to think about that. To start with I statements. That's how I try to decipher whether or not it's something that really needs to be talked about, or I need to sit on it, pray about it, and see what God has to say to me before I come to you with it. Because if I say, well, I wanted this, or I shouldn't have had this, or it shouldn't have, I thought that it should have went this way, is what I'm feeling in this moment worth me coming to you with a whole full-blown conversation about this or that or that or this or whatever? Like, and a small example of this, right? And I haven't told you this, so this is story time in general. But I had a temporary assignment at work, right? And in my first night, my first day when I came back, like as soon as I came in the door, I was expecting her to be like, "Hey, how'd it go? Tell me all about your day." But it didn't go that way right away.
Oh, dang!
It didn't right away, and it wasn't because, but you were doing like stuff. It was a Monday, so you were probably
prepping for school the next day.
So at first, naturally, I was like, bro, how's she not gonna act? Like, she knows how important this is to me. How is she not gonna ask me, like, as soon as I come in the door? I was ready to sit down and, like a kid, be like, this what happened?
And debrief.
All the stuff, right? But about an hour goes by, and then we sit down at the dinner table, and the first thing she says is, tell me about your day and tell me how it went, right? So if I would have just went off my emotions and my pride and my selfishness in that moment, we would have argued about something that she was going to ask me at a later time when everything calmed down a little bit, right? So, and like, that is the growth that we all got to have in certain moments, because it's easy for us to say, she ain't even thinking about me, and she ain't even doing this, and he not even considering it. But you got to understand, if this is your spouse or your husband,
Assume the best about
assume the
them.
best and assume that they care about your heart. Assume that they're not just out here being your enemy. That's advice I've gotten from a mentor of mine. Like, I'm for you. That's one of the best things a husband can continue to tell his wife, as I am for you. Yeah. I'm not your enemy. I'm not against you. I'm for you. Right? So if she doesn't say anything, it's not because she just said, she sat in her mind and said, I'm going to annoy him today by not, I know this, how much this means to him, and I'm not going to say nothing on purpose because like if that is you, we need to have a conversation. But but 9 times out of 10, that's not what our spouses are doing. It could be, they could have a million things in their mind. They could be, something could have just happened crazy with the kids when I got home. Like, you just never know what you're walking into, especially when you're coming home and things like that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, be slow to anger in that moment, because I could have just been like, I can't believe you. And then you'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, you wouldn't have received that at all. I'm telling you right now, it would have been bad, because you would have been like, how are you going to tell me what I was going to say or what I was going to do? Like, so I didn't even, like, you know, and it's just, and in the future, I can be like, hey, you know, when something's new, I want you to, I really want to see how, like, I'm excited. I want you to be excited too. That can be a conversation. I can't wait to share with you. That can be a lighthearted conversation we can have later. It doesn't have to be one that needs to shut down the whole household. Kids, go to your room. I need to talk to you. Like, we don't need to do that for something as simple as that. But that is, again, I'm not speaking. I wasn't always there. I'm speaking from experience. Because I've gotten to stuff where I've been like just straight crushing heaven for something that I thought she wasn't going to do, or she meant, or she didn't say. And I didn't even get in time to breathe, or like whatever the case may be, or even give it time. Like, we are so impatient with the things we want. Like, and how we want to be loved and treated. And we usually don't take that same consideration to our spouse or other people. But we should make a turn to a different, but before we move on, while we're talking about like marriage, and even with our children, talk about like family relationships, and this could probably be advice that spills over into our relationships. So what are some things that you should not ever do in a disagreement with your spouse? Do you think? Yeah, rule number 1 for me is not to attack her personally. So for me, hand below the belt, Jonin is what we call it around here. In PG County. Like, you had to be quick with it, because you could get fried up at any time. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't know what y'all call it, wherever y'all watching from. Basically, when you get joked on by somebody else, that's kind of like the culture of our county. Yeah, joning on people is a thing. It's easy in it we used to just fire those off so quickly, and like like I'm talking like the goal of that is to make somebody run a fight. I've heard some things that you've said. Exactly. Yeah. So I would fight him if he tried straight up. Like. So what I'm saying, like, that's rule number 1. I think you don't want to start making it personal. If it's a disagreement about a thing, keep it about that thing. Keep the main thing, right? Don't change it up. Don't start, because then you start arguing. Then usually, most of the times we hurt each other the most is when we veered off from the argument, started talking about each other, or our character, or our families, or our tendencies, or, you know, like, you know how that one go. You just always you acting like your mama, and you acting like your papa. That's why y'all all bums. What? Yeah. Whoa, hey. Yeah. And then now it's like, we're not even a team no more. We're not even trying to resolve a conflict. Right. So I think that's my biggest one. If I had to tell somebody one, that's it. Like, don't make it personal. No name calling. No bringing up old stuff. No saying like, you know, well, you ain't do that for me the last 5 times. So we right then and there. And this is, again, I'm preaching to myself, but these are all things that we got to learn. And they come. Those are real things. They come up in relationships you live, and even with your kids, like disagreeing with them or having a disagreement with them, especially as they get older, not attacking their character or making them feel down about themselves, but keeping the issue. And I think something that I took away from marriage counseling that we're not perfect at, but it's something that I'm mindful of, is when we are disagreeing, not using words like always and never. Like, you always do this, or you never do this. None of us always and never do anything. Like, that's just not a true statement in itself. And so when you do come to your spouse and you're like, you never do this for me,
they may not do it often, but the times that they have done it, you've now discredited that they've never cared for you in that way when they have. And maybe it's just an area of growth, or that they always do something, then you rob them of growth that they have made in an area that displeases you. And so it's just discouraging to use words like always and never. So again, sometimes we do use those words. And when we have to do a reflection of our disagreement, we're like, we said these words, we probably shouldn't be saying this one.
And I think another one is, I would say, is to listen.
Yeah.
Listen to understand, not listen to fire back.
I'm going to read a verse, a Bible verse.
Go ahead.
So, Proverbs 18, verse 2, it says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion."
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So, we don't want to be like fools. In any disagreement, and I guess this can segue into just regular relationships, friendships, and working relationships and things like, when we are in a disagreement with someone, our first stance should be, this person is more important than myself. That automatically puts you on the offense, not the defense. And then seeking to understand. If we're seeking to understand what this person is saying, and not only looking to express our own opinion, like what I have to say matters and that's it, this person's opinion doesn't matter, because that person feels just as strongly about their opinion. So now what do you say? You know,
Right.
If you're seeking to come to an agreement or to agree to disagree. I think that some people we live in a culture where we cancel people for having a difference of opinion. Like, the amount of people I've seen canceling each other because they voted differently is like, it's not something that I have wrapped my head around fully. And I just think that it's unbiblical. But when we have a disagreement with someone, and I think politically, this is a great example. There are some people who are just never going to be on the same page politically.
Sure.
Can you not love that person now? Can you agree to disagree? Like, I know they think of things different than me, but I could still see Christ in them. I could still see the love that God has for them. And so now I am called to interact with this person in a particular way. I think we are not taught or not teaching children this. Young adults are not operating in this way, that it's okay if I don't agree with somebody. It's okay. They're not my enemy because they disagree with me. And so those two things of considering someone more important than yourself, and then seeking to hear and understand what a person is saying, so that when you do respond to them, they say, okay, this person did hear me. They heard what I said. They understood what I said. And then they can receive what you have to say, knowing I feel heard. I feel understood. Even if the end of the conversation does not come with, we are on the same page.
Right. And I think those are like secondary issues. Like, there are obviously main things you got to figure out.
Yeah.
You know, like things about your children, how you discipline, boundaries you set up, budget, money stuff, like things like that. Yeah.
What about like regular relationships? So like where friends are not raising kids together, and probably are not budgeting.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of. But just even like at work, at work is a big one for me. Like we bring in a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, similar to the military. And you got people who grew up way different, who say things that are out of pocket, and you just like,
they're tone deaf.
And I'm like, did you just say that for real? And in those moments, you can say, I hear you. Don't agree though, but I still love you. Like, I would say that out of my mouth. Like, I still love you though. Like, I think even in communicating that, I think it's so interesting. I think men and women and like our friendships and the way we communicate with one another are so different. Like the way I hear men communicate with one another and move on is like, oh, that would never work with women. Like, we would be so offended and never talk to each other again if we dealt with issues the way men do sometimes. So I think that women in our friendships, I think, again, knowing that, you know, we're not in any competition with our sister. There's no room for jealousy in our relationships. In loving your sister, considering your sister more important than yourself, seeking to understand her heart, where she comes from, her circumstances, and then always seeking towards reconciliation, because that is what God has called us to. And I think that there's an area where we do have enemies. You know, we have people who, enemies in the sense of people who are working against us, people who are have made themselves our enemies, not that we are responding to them as our enemy. And I think that there is a time and a place where we have to realize that saying nothing is wise, or that a soft answer turns away wrath. Yeah.
Like, not being foolish in our speech if we already know that someone is not in a place to have a healthy conversation.
That's huge for me.
Yeah.
I think that's something I've really had to learn.
Yeah.
And because I'm very much hard on my sleeve. I'm very much, like I said, quick-witted, very much ready to go at any time. Like, I can have a conversation about anything, anytime, anywhere. I'm ready. That's just how I am. Like, you bring up a topic, I can talk to anyone. And so when that happens to me, when somebody says something or whatever and I feel away, I have to take time to just withdraw and process what was said, process how I feel, weigh my feelings against the word of God and what he says. And if I really have a valid point, I'll come home and ask heaven. I'll talk to her and be like, should I say something or should I not say something? And sometimes she may just be like, don't say nothing because she don't like confrontation. But you still like you have time. Like, you have time. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do.
Some conversations shouldn't be rushed.
Yeah, like you have time and you can say, hey, I thought about this, I prayed about this, and when you said this is how I received it, or this is how I felt, or this is whatever.
Is this how you meant it?
And when it's when it's somebody at work or something like that, I think you can just you can ask those questions. When it's your spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend in that situation, you value what they say especially like I've learned that just because I didn't feel what you felt when I said what I said, that was kind of confusing. Doesn't mean that I can't acknowledge it. Like I can't.
Yeah, like even if I was offended by what you said, but you weren't trying to offend me, you can still take responsibility for what you said and how it made me feel, even if that's not what you.
And I think a lot of times, a lot of arguments are like that. It's like people are like, "Well,
I didn't mean it that way, so why you take it that way?"
It doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter.
Can we flesh that out? And when you are having a disagreement with someone and what you say offends that person, it's not about your intentions in the moment.
No.
Your intentions don't verify your apology. Like, if you have offended somebody with what you've said, it's nothing to say, I'm sorry I made you feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I hurt you with what I said. I did not mean it that way, but I understand that it hurt you and I'm sorry. That's what it means to take care of someone and love someone. That person is hurt. You didn't mean to hurt them, but you did.
Right. Yeah. And if their feelings come from a place that is not Holy Spirit driven, that's not your responsibility to tell them that it wasn't.
Right.
So you say, okay, and maybe again, your soft answer and your humility and your desire to reconcile with your brother or sister, your husband, your wife, it eventually will, to use a biblical reference, heap ashes or coals on their head. You can't argue with no one. I've never seen somebody argue with a wall. So if I'm there and I'm listening and they're bringing 100% of all the energy and I'm just like listening, taking it, explaining. If they ask for explanation, then they say, well, this is how you, and then you say, well, first off, let me apologize for making you feel that way. Like, this happens a lot of times at work for us. We get to a place, somebody's on $1.5 million because we showed up too late. They don't like who was there. Somebody, a partner said something that they didn't like, and we got to go from 100, bring them back down to 10. And the way we do that is not matching that energy.
Their energy, yeah.
Bringing it down, say, listen, I'm sorry that this happened, but I apologize for whoever's actions, whether it be mine or whoever. And how can we help you today? Like, how can I, and then they calm down. Right. Yeah. And it's the same thing with our friends, in our relationships, our spouses, the same thing. Like, it's a tendency, and I think this is the devil's work, but it's a tendency for us to be so relaxed with our jaws and our tongues with our spouses. Like, we just be wanting to just talk crazy. We would never do that. We would never do that. And shout out to KB and Amin for talking about this. But it's like, I ain't never, as many angry husbands I've seen, I ain't never seen nobody smack their boss or talk crazy to their boss at work or punch. Ain't no holes in the wall at work. That's what he said, right? But that's the truth. Like, why is it that we feel like we can come home and just be absolutely disrespectful? Like, take liberties with that, and I think that's a work of the enemy. Like, we go to work and we know, like,
have the utmost respect.
If my boss says something out of pocket, I ain't just, some people might, if you listen to that and you one of them catch these hands Christians, we praying for you. But if you one of them people who say, I know I can't say that, so let me just take a deep breath, and then you call your wife and tell her what your boss just said, you can't believe it, right? Mm-hmm. But we need to kind of have that soft approach at home. Like, if we have to wear body cameras at work. Imagine having to wear one at home. And that was public knowledge. Good gracious. Every time you got into a conflict, you had to wear a body camera, and then people got to watch what you said and did. Mm-hmm. Like, how crazy would that be? How ashamed would you be of the things you said? And it's like, take that approach. Like, okay, God is watching me as I have this conversation. Mm-hmm. I want to honor him when I'm having this conversation. So let me look at my wife or my husband or whoever the case may be, my friend, and let me look at them as he sees them and care for them. Yeah. Care for their heart, hear what they got to say, and go from there. Yeah. And some people, like we have come across people in our life who just are never satisfied with whatever. And at that point, as a believer, we're called to, as far as it's up to us, according to Romans 12, to live at peace with everyone. As far as it's up to us.
Where's I think it's somewhere in Ephesians. Maybe it's in Corinthians. It's somewhere in the New Testament, but it talks about where it talks about like in the last days people will be lovers of but one of the things that it says people will be in the last days is they will not be satisfied. Like they can't, what's the word about not being able to be satisfied? There's a word, it's in the, I'm gonna have to look it up. Fulfill or just like there's nothing that you can do to ever like satisfy them and make them happy. They are just always going to be in this perpetual state of dissatisfaction. Yeah. And so it says that's how people are going to be in the last days. So we're going to be in relationship and some sort of someone that, or a person that is just not going to be satisfied. I have notes here from one of Pastor Mike's sermons, and it was written in from that Sunday, but it says the quality of my life equals the quality of my relationships. If my relationships suffer, I suffer. Mm-hmm. And so we have to think of that when we are in relationships with people. We have to, one, have that, we need to be expectant that there's going to become a time where I disagree with this person, and there's going to be a confrontation. How I deal with that is going to, it matters to the health of my relationship. And I think how you deal with disagreements in the beginning of friendships, in the beginning of relationships, can set the tone of your friend feeling safe with you. Like, I know Heaven's always going to be honest with me, and if she doesn't agree with something, she's not going to attack me. Mm-hmm. She's not going to cut me off. She's not going to go talk about me to other people, but she's going to come to me in love, express how she feels, and give me a space to make that right. Yeah. And I think that that's not something that is, gosh, I did not learn that in my friendships. Like, I had to learn that as an adult. I was a very offended person. And if someone offended me, I'm just like, I don't need to be their friend anymore. Like, and that's just it's not how believers should go about their life at all. Yeah. I know we're about out of time, but do you mind if I read a couple of Proverbs that talks about our tongue? Okay, so in Proverbs 15, there's probably more, but it is drenched in.
Yeah, we did a whole thing with
talking about how we should be talking. Mm-hmm. Verse 15, verse 1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So that speaks to if you meet somebody with the same degree of harshness, it's just going to stir up more anger. Verse 2 says, "The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but in the mouth of a fool pours out folly." Verse 4 says, "A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness and it breaks the spirit." So that goes to the marriage piece, that if your words are filled with perverseness or harshness and sinfulness, it breaks someone's spirit. That's the discouragement part that I was talking about. It breaks a person's spirit when you talk to them that way. Verse 7 says, "The lips of the wise spread knowledge, not so the heart of fools." So it's hard to be harsh and spread wisdom. Yeah. Like you can't be wise when you speak that way. Verse 18 says, "A hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention." So when you can approach a situation slowly, being slow to anger, like it says in James, that you can quiet contention. The fear of the Lord is instruction to the wisdom, and humility comes before honor. So I think that goes both ways. In order to honor someone, you need to come with humility, and if you want to be honored, you need to show humility.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I thought that those
Yeah, and
all
I mean,
of those verses
and
were
just to wrap it up, practice at home. That's it. You're going to get the best practice at home. Give your spouse or your kids, whoever, give them opportunity to mess up. They're going to mess up. Receive them with love when they mess up. If they, when they ask for forgiveness, forgive them. Learn how to have these conversations. For me, I'm like a pacer back and forth, but sometimes if I sit down, or like heaven knows if I say, come here, let me hold your hands. She doesn't like when I do that, but like she knows that I'm about to say something that's serious, but like when I'm holding her hands, it's hard for me to just be like super aggressive.
and it's hard when someone's holding your hands and they're looking you in the eye. It's hard for you to be offended by anything that they say.
Yeah, and I think just practice this with the way you talk to your kids, the way you encourage your kids to talk to you and talk to each other if you have multiple.
Yes, that is something that I wasn't taught growing up. I mean, my mom did not. I wouldn't say that she let us fight. We fought all the time, but there was not an emphasis on your brother or your sister, the most important person in your life right now. Love them, cherish them.
Yeah.
Don't talk to them that way.
Yeah.
So we definitely do that with our girls. Like, even though they're pretty far apart in age,
Don't matter. They still go ahead.
my younger one can be a little harsh with her.
She's mean.
Her tone.
She's very mean with her words.
So we have to constantly remind her, like, this is not how you speak to your sister.
Yeah.
Because I think that how they talk to their siblings is eventually how they talk to their friends and other people. And we don't want to teach them to take liberties with one another either. I think that's one of my biggest regrets looking back on my childhood and my teenage years is just how my lack of regard for my sisters, my younger sisters. I wish that I could go back and change that so much. I don't want them to have the same regrets. So.
Yeah. So I mean, we could go in so many different directions with this, but thank you guys for listening. If you have questions, shoot us a DM. At Shepherding Souls, at Charlie, or at Heaven Shepherd, wherever. We would love to answer questions. We love to get on FaceTime. We love to talk to people.
You gonna FaceTime people?
I will FaceTime anyway. If somebody say, hey, can I FaceTime you? I got a question. Sure, let's talk. You know what I mean? I love doing it. I love sitting down with Heaven and talking to other couples, especially young couple. Like I'm saying, like we old, but people who are younger than us and have questions, and newly married people. Like I love that. If we can pass on the knowledge that we've gotten, and by our mistakes we can share with other people, we want to do that. So we appreciate all you all. Like, subscribe, comment, share, repost, do whatever.
I think if there's comments and questions too, sometimes that can help guide the topics that we talk about.
Absolutely. So yeah, we are coming to the end of season 1.
Yeah.
One more episode after this.
For the holidays.
Take a break for the holidays, and we probably holler at y'all in the new year. So this has been fun. We continue to do it every week. We love y'all. Thank you for watching.
Follow
Peace.
the shepherd.
We holla.